of this video is to show you the 4 different models that we have in our medium duty cylinder arms machine. These are machines that will use a thread in the thinner sort of range of thread from a metric 40 up to a metric 15 in most cases, particularly in the 6900 we have here. It's a bit better at using that thicker thread, whereas the others probably max out about the metric 20 size. That is because the 6900 has 2 tension adjustments on the top thread, which makes it a bit easier with the thicker thread to get the tensions right. We'll go into that a bit more later on. These machines have a very comfortable maximum of 8mm thick to sew through, but all of them have a presser foot lift of 15-16mm with the additional presser foot lifting, whether that be by the pedal or the knee lever. So they do have capability to sew up to about 11mm if you're big, which does give you a huge range of capability, as these are also able to sew right down to thin materials, thin leather, canvas, especially able to do these thinner materials with the thin thread, which you can't do on the heavy duty sewing machines like 2500 and 32. So we'll run through some of the differences and similarities in these machines. We have some of them set up here on the pedestal table and some on the U-shaped table. All of them are available in either configuration. So depending on what you're sewing and what feels comfortable for you, which one you choose. The pedestal table does give the best access around the cylinder arm because there's nothing there. If you're sewing bags and things like that, that's definitely the way to go. This U-shape does restrict the availability you have around the cylinder arm here. If you're doing a big bag or something, you just can't get around it because you're going to keep the table. Some people really like the U-shaped table. It feels comfortable to them. It's like a desk to sit at. And you have this bench here for sitting things on. So it comes down to a bit of preference for yourself, for your space, and for the projects that you're going to do, what is going to work best for you. We do sell a lot of these pedestal tables because that gives you the best access and opportunity for choosing a cylinder arm sewing machine. These two at the front here, our 6900, which is the top of this range, and the 7341, which comes just below it in the list. These have the capability and availability of the stainless steel flatbed table attachment to go over the cylinder arm, which gives you the versatility of having a flat space if you want it, for doing flat items like wallets or diary covers or something where you want a bit of extra support there to sit things on, or you can easily put it on and off depending on what projects you're sewing. These two at the back here, the 227R and the 246, they don't have a factory available flatbed table attachment. The 6900 is the only one that has the built-in bobbin winder here, where the bobbin goes on here and you can run it there. The rest of them have this bobbin winder that screws onto the table and runs off the belt. This wheel up against the belt, and as the belt's running, the wind bobbin. There's not a lot of pros and cons of either one. They both do a pretty good job. The 6900 is the only one that has the knee lever for the presser foot lift, for the extra presser foot lift. So they all have the lever at the back, which you can use to lift the presser foot, but they all have extra lift available if you use the auxiliary method of lifting the presser foot, which on the 6900 is the knee lever. See push that over, the foot's lifting, and you get a whole 16 millimeters, maybe a bit more, by using that device on that machine. The others all have the same mechanism of the pedal, which is connected by a chain up to the back of the machine, and by pushing the pedal you can get pressure foot lift that way. Both of these methods allow you to be able to lift the presser foot while you're sewing, while keeping your hands on the material. So when you want to turn a corner or something like that, you can just use your foot on your knee to lift the presser foot to lift the pressure there, and you can turn the corner, drop it back down and keep sewing without having to take your hands off your work. The stitch length adjustment is a little bit different on each one, but in general the stitch length available is a bit over 8 millimeters on these two machines, the 6900 and the 7341. On the 246 and the 227R, it's about 6 millimeters as the maximum stitch length. They all have a reverse capability. Most of them just have this lever at the side for you to hold down while you are reverse sewing. The 227R is a little bit different. It has a stitch length adjustment up top here, and this lever up is for sewing forwards, and then to sew in reverse. Similarly to the other machines, you just hold the lever down to make it sew in reverse. The bobbin size is another difference in the machines. This is the bobbin out of the 227R. All of the others have this size bobbin. You can see the difference there. These have about 10 millimeters extra in the diameter. They're the same thickness, that's the diameter is bigger, so you can fit the wool thread onto these ones. The other difference is the bobbin position. So these three machines all have the top drop-in bobbin. The 6100 and the 7341 have the same setup here. They have the same shape in the cylinder arm. They have this little holder that the bobbin goes into first, and it has the tension adjustment on it, and then that sits down into the hook assembly here. And these bobbins also have their own little holder that put them into first, and then that pops in the end here. I do like this way of positioning the bobbin myself, but there's not a lot of pros and cons between them. The main difference is in being able to adjust the tension while you have any work on there. It is a bit easier with the top loading bobbin, because usually just sewing on the edge of something, you can get in here with your screwdriver to adjust the tension if you need to make a change to get your tension looking right. This is a little bit harder to get at, but one of the pros of this, in my opinion, is they're less likely to jam up with any loose threads that are floating around. On this type of machine, you do have to be quite careful not to have any loose threads hanging around here while you're sewing, because they have a very good tendency to get wrapped around the bobbin, which is a bit of a pain to undo. Not impossible, and it is quite possible to not do it if you just be careful of where the threads are, but it is something that you probably will do if you have a machine like that. these are a bit easier to get a new thread out of, and it's not quite working the same way. That makes it easy for thread to get jammed. So while we're talking about the bobbins, we'll just have a look at the thread tension adjustment on them. These bobbin holders out of the 6900 and the 7341 have the tension adjustment on this screw here. This spring affects the tension for the bobbin. The 227R has a similar looking adjustment, but it is not able to be taken on the machine. It's fixed as part of the hook assembly. And the 246 works the same way. It's also able to be taken out, and this screw here is what adjusts the tension. So looking at the top thread tension, on the 227R and the 246, they just have this one thread tension adjustment for the top thread. It's a bit of a guide which does add tension to it, but this is the only adjustment that you can make. The 7341 is a little bit better. It has this thread tension guide as well. It doesn't put as much tension on it as something like this though. So it's not making as much difference, but it is better than not having any adjustment there. On the 6900 we have these guides for the thread, and these discs that it goes through, which work a little bit like that one on the 7341. They're not making much difference there. And then we have two totally adjustable tension discs for the thread to go through, which does really help in setting up the tension if you want to use a thicker thread like the 15 size. While we're here with the 6900, we'll just have a look at some of the other features that it has, which the others do not. The 6900 has an oil sump in the bottom here, and it will automatically pump oil around through a series of tubes and wicks around the machine while you're sewing. So we call it a semi-automatic lubricating machine because there are still a couple of places with the red paint that you do need to manually apply oil to, but it is, as long as you have oil in the sump, it is keeping up the lubrication all around the machine to most of the moving parts. The other machines have a lot of spots on them with the red paint, which you need to apply the oil to, the sewing machine oil to manually, and the guide is for about 8 hours of sewing that you need to oil the machine, but that does depend a lot on the time it takes you to do 8 hours of sewing. If that's 8 sessions of 1 hour over 6 months, then you probably should be applying oil a bit more frequently, probably every time you use it. So back to the 6900 and its other features. The big dial on the top here is for adjusting the height of the alternating walking feet. So I'll just pull the thread out of here because of, remember what I said before about needing these threads. So this is set on 2 at the moment, which is what I consider a general good setting for most sewing. And we can wind that up. You can see the foot lifting there while I wind it. And then it steps a lot higher while it's walking. That easy adjustment means that you can increase the presser foot, the walking foot height very quickly if you're working on a project that has a lot of changes in the height of the stack of material that you're sewing through. If there's lots of changes, then having a higher presser foot walking height is beneficial to let it step up onto the next layer when it changes. The 6900 also has more of a rectangular feeding pattern in the movement of the presser bar and the needle bar, whereas the others are on more of a pendulum, and this helps to keep the rectangular motion helps to keep the stitch length more similar as the thickness of the material increases. With the pendulum motion, as the stack of material increases, the stitch length will often get shorter even though you don't adjust the stitch length. The rectangular motion helps keep that closer in length even as the stack of the height of the material increases. The 7341 is much comparable to the Cobra Class 26 if you're wanting to compare things like that. In my opinion, the 6900 is superior because of the extra capabilities that we have mentioned in this video, like the automatic oiling, the easily adjustable walking foot height, and the knee lever I think is better than the pedal, and also the built-in bobbin winder is an advantage. The 246 has some great capabilities because it has the larger size bobbin like the 7341 and 6900, but is in similar price category to the 2D7R, so it makes it a really good buy for someone that wants to get into a machine economically. The finish on these probably isn't as good as on the 6900 and 7341 as far as the paint job and stuff like that. It probably doesn't look quite as nice. A lot of the time it's not a lot of difference, but that is one thing that does put it in that lower sort of price bracket. And having the side loading bobbin is really good. And one thing I didn't touch on before is the profile of the cylinder arm, of the end of the cylinder. You'll see on the 246 it has a tiny little end to the cylinder arm. It also has the smallest distance from the needle to the end of the cylinder arm, which means you can get into some really tight spaces better than the other machines. We'll show a comparison of the end of the cylinder arms here. So that does make the 246 a good buy at an economical price. So if you want to get into that light to medium duty sewing, the 246 does quite a good job for its price and appearance and everything like that. The 227R is at the start of the medium duty sewing machine range as far as price goes. One of the things that puts it apart the most is the smaller bobbin. The only having one tension adjustment on the top thread, but it is a really good machine. They are well made, robust, and this stitch length adjustment is pretty good. Fairly accurate as far as being able to wind it in and be able to come back to the same stitch length after you change it, if you wanted to put some little marks on there or something for the stitch lengths that you like. They do have a fairly small profile on the end of the cylinder arm for getting into tight places. So for a budget, wanting to get into a light to medium duty cylinder arm sewing machine, the 2D7R shouldn't be overlooked for those things. If you're happy to go with the smaller bobbin, if you're always using a thinner thread, then that won't be so much of a problem. You'll still have plenty of a thin thread. The reverse on these is pretty amazing. It nearly always matches up all the way through the range of stitch lengths. A lot of the other machines work good at one stitch length, and then as you get shorter or longer, they don't quite match up as good. But I found the 227R to be pretty good at matching stitch length forward to reverse. So 227R is our budget entry machine to the medium duty cylinder arm sewing machine. I didn't mention earlier, all of these machines are compound feed. That means that the presser foot is walking, going up and down. The needle is feeding, and the needle foot as well is walking and feeding the material through. And there's the feed dog underneath that is moving as well, all in sync together, so you get quite consistent stitch length and stitch quality. When deciding whether you need to look for a machine in the light to medium duty range or step up into the heavy duty range, the main things to consider are how thick the maximum stack of material that you want to sew through is, and how thick of a thread you want to use. That is quite a big factor into it. If you want to use quite a thick thread, then you'll have to go into the heavy duty range, like the 3200, 4500, because these machines just can't handle a thicker thread. The availability of needles in that size is pretty slim, and it's quite difficult to get the tensions right because they're designed to use a thinner thread. Likewise, the heavy duty machines are quite difficult to get a thin thread to work in them for the same reasons that you can't get a leather point needle in a smaller size than 23, which you would use for a metric 20 size thread. And the tension adjustments on them are just designed for a thicker thread, so it's quite difficult to get them right for a thinner thread. I have heard some people using the thinner thread on their machines, but it would take a lot of setting up, and swapping between thread sizes I think would be fairly difficult. And then for thickness of material that you're sewing, these machines are designed for the thinner work. They can do some fairly substantial stacks of material, 10 mil or a little bit more, but they're very good at the thinner materials with the smaller feed dog, smaller needle, like just the whole profile of the needle is a bit smaller. Makes them better at doing the thinner work than a heavy duty machine doing the thinner work, because the heavy duty machines can be quite versatile too, to go down to sewing canvas or kangaroo leather, especially with our narrow spotted needle plates. But if most of your work is in that lighter range, then these machines will probably be better at doing that job. There isn't a machine that will do everything perfectly, unfortunately. No unicorn machine like that, so it comes down to choosing the machine that will do best the most of the work that you have. And also, it is pretty difficult to get a thick thread to work well on a soft, thin piece of leather. So you may have to compromise a little bit if that's what you're dreaming of doing. So these medium duty machines can do quite a range of projects, from light little things like earrings, or your canvas work, vinyl, some heavy fabrics. I have played with the 6900 enough to make it so satin before, so it is possible, and right up to doing belts, wallets, some horse gear even. with the thicker thread. They're all things that you can do on one of these machines. I guess keep in mind the length of the cylinder for some of the projects, but there is a lot you can do on these machines. So if you have any questions or just want to find out more about them and the extra accessories that they come with, there are things like different feet, as probably I should have mentioned. These machines all use presser feet that are easily available. They are the same as what's on heaps of other compound feed medium duty sewing machines. So there's left and right toe feet, edge guide feet, piping feet, binder feet. A lot of different options are easily available and they're not very expensive. They can all have a drop down edge guide fitted on the back for helping you to sew a straight even seam. We talked about the flatbed table attachment that's available for the 7341 and the 6900. I can put a needle positioning device on any of these machines as well. That probably deserves its own video to explain that. If you don't already know what that is, the electronic positioning system. And there are also lights that are available for these sewing machines as well as spare bobbins and needles. These machines all take needles in the system 135, either 135 by 17 for the canvas point or 135 by 16 for the leather point. And leather point comes in slanted stitch or straight stitch. That probably deserves its own video as well. Lots of information, so hopefully having it in this video means you can look back at it and find the bits that you need to, and you're always welcome to give me a call though, and yeah, we can work out what's best for projects that you want to do. Thanks for watching.